and it was just kind of an interesting way, and then which then makes you wonder, how have older generations really done a good job of explaining how you handle when there is injustice in the world, and
Yeah.
that someone would either A, take such an extreme, or B, would say this is, yeah, I'm okay with this, of a way of handling of evil in the world.
Yeah, I think the Mangione case is a great example. And I had a few people sort of reflect on that too, as this seems like a similar sort of trend. Yeah, where I mean, lots of people that I was aware of seemed in some ways, not necessarily supportive, but like I had some people, many people, um, being like, that this is such a tragedy that Gen Z has this perspective. And that actually wasn't the intention of the article. The intention of the article is to say, this is the perspective I think Gen Z broadly shares. Here's some reasons why. And biblically, I think that there's actually language to that. I don't think that that's actually a perspective that is completely rejected by scripture, because we have things like the imprecatory psalms, right? That there's space and language for these deep, outcries against injustice. It just needs to be directed in the right way, right?
And I'll admit, when I first read it being of an older generation, of Generation X, it was kind of like shocking to
Yeah.
read that. And so it's kind of hard to get into the framework of, maybe there is something here. It's not a sense that, my God, we're raising a generation of killers or something,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
to understand, which kind of leads me to this question of, why is it that you think Gen Z see things much differently? You talk about something about how, I mean, you even kind of frame how, things about, like, let's say the response to COVID-19,
Yeah.
um, and also, um, how the response to seeing, let's say, someone like David fall wasn't shock, which I think older generations, that's how they would have responded, but it was a
Yeah.
sense of anger.
Yeah.
And so, what is it has happened maybe in the wider culture, that has led them to respond in a different way, than, say, an older generation?
Yeah, I think that I mean, I think you mentioned COVID, and I think that did have really significant effects on my generation, and I think that sociologically, like, that's not my field, but what I've heard is that that has had significant effects on how we view and relate to other people. And I think that the primary medium through which we've started viewing and relating to other people is through like digital media, and less of a human sort of embodied viewing of another person as, from a Christian perspective, created in the image of God. And so I think that dissociation from someone's humanity makes it a lot easier to go to the reaction of anger or judgment. Um, and yeah, like I said, I think that there's also this experience that I teased out a little bit in the article, but there definitely is much more that could be written on it, of people generally gravitating towards parts of scripture like the imprecatory psalms when they feel powerless and
Hmm.
oppressed, right? And that's often the context for these parts of scripture, even like David running for his life, or Israel being oppressed by Assyrians or Babylonians, or the Exodus. There are even some imprecatory elements there. And I think that, and then you look at like the the slave tradition in North America, sort of like looking to some of these places in scripture for not only hope, but also hoping for like their own justice, right?
Yeah.
And so I think Gen Z, even though we're living in a time where we have much more materially than generations before us, I think that there's still a sense where the tragedy of the world seems so big when you're seeing it all the time. When you're seeing the catastrophes overseas, when you're seeing like the political turmoil here at home, I think there's just this sense of powerlessness and hopelessness that makes us want to cry out for someone to like intervene, basically. Sort of carrying on that a similar perspective that's, I think, spoken to in the biblical tradition.
So how do you, I mean, because you said that the response from older generations was a little alarmed, is how
Yeah,
do older generations understand where this younger generation is coming from? Because it seems like there is a way of that happening with,
yeah,
because you brought up the imprecatory Psalms.
yeah,
And I think that those are important. Obviously, they are not telling you go and do likewise.
of course.
They are explaining kind of a cry of the heart that,
Yeah,
this is not fair. This is unjust.
yeah,
God, you need to come and do something.
yeah,
Um, and I guess, how do we create a space for people to listen,
yeah.
and both people who are Gen Z who are in the church, but also those who even are outside of the church?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thinking about putting this like these concepts into practice, I do think can be difficult because like I said, I think that the urge is to um correct, and not out of like a judgment necessarily from older generations to Gen Z, but like a desire for Gen Z to see like the love and hope and acceptance and beauty that's found like in the gospel and through Jesus Christ. And I think that there's this tendency to rush Gen Z through the process. I do think that that's still the end goal. But I even experienced trying to walk through some of these conversations in my classes of trying to explain how this this naming of evil that my students have is right and good, right? We should be able to say that is evil, that is unjust, and that something should be done about it. I think that the trouble is that this perspective my students often had was that I don't see the thing happening that I think should be happening, and so I'm going to do it myself. And what I tried to walk them through was that in doing that, they're sort of becoming the actors of injustice that they're decrying, right? They're saying these people are perpetrating injustice, and so I'm going to punish them. And yet you are viewing them as less than human to allow yourself to punish them in the way you want to punish them. And so you're then caught in the same trap. So I think that, yeah, I don't want to like diminish the difficulty of walking through that conversation with Gen Z. I think the first part does have to come from listening. I think that there's this tendency to sort of be like Job's friends in a way, like
Mm.
Job's having these like these cries of anguish. And the friends are like, and like, have you read Proverbs? That's not, like that's not.
Have you tried praying more? Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. They echo a lot of Proverbs, and yet you have to hold the two together.